All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good buddy Greg Kaufmann. Greg is a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress and the editor of Talk Poverty, which you can find at talkpoverty.org. You can also follow him on Twitter at Greg Kaufmann. Greg, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thanks, Matt. It's always great to talk to you.
All right, so Greg, over at Talk Poverty, you guys actually recently are partnering with BillMoyers.com, and of course, Bill Moyers is amazing.
Right.
You guys actually partnered for a series called 12 Days, 12 Actions You Can Take to Fight Poverty. Tell us about the series.
Yeah, well, first, I mean, we can't thank Bill Moyers enough because Talk Poverty just launched in May of this year, and they've really helped us to get our articles out there. I mean, they've published like more than 30 of our articles, and now, to their credit, these two weeks, for 2 weeks, they are focusing exclusively on poverty coverage. So they got in touch with us and said, hey, actually 2 years ago, I'd written a similar column. I think it was just called 12 Things You Can Do to Fight Poverty, which they published. And they said, hey, how about repeating that? And we'll do sort of reveal one per day, one thing people can do. So it's been a great opportunity for us. And certainly when you're talking about poverty, there's no shortage of material of things we could do, should do, usually aren't doing. And also, one of the things I like doing in this kind of work is, showing that there are actually a lot of really good people working on poverty who know what they're talking about and who can create avenues for our activism. So that's what we're trying to do with this series.
Yeah, and again, the whole idea of even Talk Poverty and what you were doing at The Nation prior to moving over to CAP, you guys, again, just the idea of really focusing on poverty instead of kind of like, because we talked about this all the time, which is like even Democrats are a lot of times afraid to say the word poverty.
Right.
And there's like, oh, we got to have middle class jobs.
Right.
And it's just shrinking and actually not even focusing on the people that actually need it the most. Where actually more people are actually going into poverty than into the middle class now.
Right.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah, and I read that very article, and I was glad to see that on the New York Times, whose coverage I think has improved in the last year as more people fall from the middle class to poverty. But yeah, definitely, the focus of The Nation was on raising this issue, raising the voices of people in poverty. And here at Talk Poverty, what we're doing is having people who are working on poverty and having people who live in poverty or at risk of poverty posting about their work and their lives every day. And that's obviously Bill Moyers has a real commitment to this issue, so there's sort of a natural partnership around this.
Yeah. Again, I'm talking to Greg Kaufmann from Talk Poverty, talkpoverty.org. You can find him on Twitter at Greg Kaufmann. Well, so let's get into some of the posts that have already been put up on the 12 Days, 12 Ways You Can Fight Poverty series here. The first one, and we actually were just talking about the New York Times here a second ago. One of the first ones you had was the media must tell the true story of the struggle in America. Tell us about it.
Yeah, and that is a post from Deepak Bhargava at the Center for Community Change. He is a man, and his organization is one that I've admired for years because they really work on the ground with community groups all over the country. They have for decades. And usually in the background, people often don't know the work they're doing, which is rare in Washington, D.C., where people tend to lead with their brand or whatever you want to call it. But they make a great point that he actually quotes Bill O'Reilly talking about people in poverty as, addictive behavior, laziness, apathy, and that their personal behavior has to change. And he makes the point that, these are sort of some of the overriding stereotypes that make our policy so bad and make poverty such a hard issue to work on, because people have this default horrible ideas about what poverty is. And so Center for Community Change is collecting stories from people. That the best antidote to that kind of those kinds of lies, basically, and misinformation and stereotypes are the authentic experiences of what people are experiencing when they're getting paid poverty wages, when they have no scheduling rights. I mean, that's a big issue now. People needing more than a day's notice of what their schedules are going to be. The proliferation of low-wage work being a huge issue. Lack of ability to organize being a huge issue. When people tell the stories of their experiences, that's how we're going to better understand poverty, and that's got to inform our policy. So they have an effort of collecting stories, and I'm going to check that link. It's ourstoriesourpower.org. And they're off to a great start. I'm not sure how long they've been doing it, and actually, Talk Poverty is working with them too. We do a story collection effort called Our American Story, and we're not competing with one another. And for example, they have some writing fellows at Center for Community Change who they've collected their stories as well, and they're also writing articles about their experiences. And they had me in for a workshop a couple of weeks ago to talk to them about some of the ways I've found to be the most effective storytelling. Excuse me. So I guess what I'm saying is part of this series is highlighting their work, and as we highlight people's work, we should find new ways to partner together. But yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's one of those things where it's like one of the things that kind of sometimes bugs me about the left is because in a lot of ways there's so little money going around as far as like organizations and actually like infrastructure funding that you actually have people like fighting over the pennies that are around here. Like the sad truth is there's not a lot of money in doing good.
Right.
There's a lot of money in doing evil.
Right.
And the fact that we sort of like, there should be lots of groups working on poverty, and the fact that there's not there shouldn't be like a competition between, because they're all kind of working for the same ends here. Let's actually move on to one of the other articles, because it's all these kind of like large issues that contribute to and perpetuate poverty. The next one you guys published was actually the workers' ability to bargain. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Sarita Gupta with Jobs with Justice. I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with Jobs with Justice. They also do great on-the-ground work with low-wage workers, service industry workers, and they talk about there are similarities to Deepak's post in terms of telling the real story about what workers are going through in terms of their low wages, in terms of their erratic schedules, and really they tie in terms of not being able to get the hours they need, and really they tie everything to the way that collective bargaining power has just plummeted, and that's sort of their overarching theme is that only through bargaining do workers have the ability to confront corporations that are making their lives harder. And we know this, Matt. Like one of us alone, a worker alone, against multinational corporations, subsidiaries that you can't identify. I mean, you can't even follow the chain of power nowadays. So, Jobs with Justice is just doing a great job working with unions, working with alt labor groups in terms of pushing for collective bargaining, collective power to take on corporate entities that are trapping people in poverty.